بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله حمدا كثيرا طيبا مباركا فيه وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلوات الله وسلامه عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد. So tonight inshallah we're going to continue on with the masaa'il of Sajdah Sahu, and we're going to continue on with an increase in the salah. We're going to continue with an increase in the salah, but most of the masaa'il tonight will rotate around an increase in the rak'ah, an increase in the rak'ah, increase in a rak'ah in salah. And if we get chance, then we're going to speak on increasing an action in salah from actions that are not from salah. So this is category 2 of an increase in salah from actions. So category 1 was increase in salah from actions that are in salah, and we spoke on them, the ruku', the sajdah, sitting and standing. And what's remaining is increasing an action in salah from actions that are not from the actions of salah. So that's what we'll cover today inshallah. So to begin with, one more thing with our previous masaa'il, and that is when we spoke about a person increasing a ruku' or sajdah or standing or sitting, the fuqaha mentioned, and they mention it, or we could mention it when we speak on a decrease because it fits better there. But just to mention it here in case I forget, the Hanbali fuqaha say that if a person leaves off sitting, standing, or let's say specifically like a rukn, a pillar in salah, like ruku', sajdah, etc. If a person leaves it off intentionally, they say the entire salah becomes invalid. They say the entire salah becomes invalid. So they mention this because some of the fuqaha outside the madhab, maybe inside. If I'm trying to recall, I'm not sure inside the madhab, but outside of the madhab, some of the fuqaha do not invalidate the entire salah if a rukn was left out. But the Hanbali fuqaha invalidate the entire salah. So that's one thing to mention there, and to remember it in case I forget to mention it when we speak about a decrease in salah. Then here the fuqaha mentioned, to continue, وَلَوْ نَوَى الْقَصْرَ فَأَتَمَّ سَهْوًا فَفَرْضُهُ رَكْعَتَانْ وَيَسْجُدُ لِلسَّهْوِ اسْتِحْبَابًا. So this is a very interesting mas'ala that they speak about, a mas'ala that we're going to break it down into quite a few categories. So they're speaking about a person who is a traveler, a musaafir. So this person will enter the salah, or is going to begin the salah intending to perform 2 rak'ah, intending to shorten the salah. So then they say فَأَتَمَّ سَهْوًا. Then this person by mistake, forgetfully, or by mistake, the same thing, he gets up and for the 3rd rak'ah and the 4th rak'ah. So he completes the salah is 4 raka'aat. What happens here is situation 1. Situation 1, he completed the salah, he added the 3rd and the 4th rak'ah. He did it unintentionally. He did it forgetfully. He didn't realize he got up for a 3rd and a 4th rak'ah and he completed the salah. Here the Hanbali fuqaha say, here in this case, a person should, in this case, we'd say it's mustahab for him to do Sajdah Sahu. It's mustahab for him to do Sajdah Sahu. And then they also say that the fard are the first 2 rak'ah. The fard is the first 2 rak'ah. So therefore the last 2 rak'ah, it's as if they were not there. They were just extra. It's as if they were not there, it was just extra. So it's very important to focus on every word, because masaa'il are going to build. Masaa'il are going to build from this. What are we going to deem the last 2 rak'ah, for example, or the Sajdah Sahu, or the situation of the person performing the salah? And we also said he got up for the 3rd and 4th rak'ah forgetfully. So all of these words are important because it implies other things, because they imply other things. What do they imply? We're going to touch on it now. So they say, firstly, in this case, a person, he prayed 4 raka'aat, he realized, therefore we'd say Sajdah Sahu is mustahab. We won't say wajib. What's the qa'idah we mentioned last time? We mentioned last time that if a person, that Sajdah Sahu is wajib, if a person did something forgetfully or by mistake in salah, and had he done that thing intentionally in salah, then had he done this thing intentionally in salah, his salah would be invalid. So based on saying that, if a person, a musaafir, a traveler, intended to perform 4 raka'aat, so he completed 4 raka'aat intentionally, then would we say his salah is invalid? The answer is no. The answer is no. Therefore, Sajdah Sahu be wajiba? The answer is no. The answer is no. Sajdah Sahu will be mustahab. Sajdah Sahu will be mustahab. That's a relied upon position of the madhab. That's a relied upon position of the madhab. Some of the fuqaha, Mar'i al-Karmi, says that it's wajibah. Wajibah, but according to the qawa'id of the madhab, it would not be wajibah, and that's the mu'tamad. That's a relied upon position of the madhab, that Sajdah Sahu is mustahab. And if a person does not realize, then it's okay. If he realizes after the salah, he'll perform Sajdah Sahu. If he doesn't realize ever, or he realizes after too long, then the salah is valid, Sajdah Sahu falls. And that I mentioned quickly because the rules of Sajdah Sahu come at the end of the chapter, meaning that we're going to mention these masaa'il. But now if a person one day Sajdah Sahu, I forgot Sajdah Sahu, this happened to me, I forgot Sajdah Sahu, I remembered half an hour later, I remembered when I left the mosque, etc. These masaa'il, we're going to come to it later on. So then what has to be done? You just connect the masaa'il. So now we spoke about a person who performed 4 raka'aat by mistake. So, and what did we say? He said the last two raka'aat were extra. They were extra, so they were not there. It was as if they were not there, and the fard would be 2 raka'at. So now this is a person who completed the salah unintentionally. Okay, now situation 2. We're speaking of a person praying salah alone. If the person intended from the beginning of the salah, I'm not going to pray shortened salah, I'm going to pray 4. In that case, we'd say all 4 raka'at would be fard. Okay, so it's very important to remember that, because as we come through masaa'il later, it's important to remember that, because then you're just going to connect the dots. Then the third situation, this person munfarid, this person praying salah alone, he's intending 2 raka'at when he starts the salah. He begins the salah. During the salah, he intends to make it 4 raka'at. Okay, now we would say that a change of intention in salah, when a change is valid, when a change in the intention is valid, it's okay. So what does that mean exactly? We'll mention it just now, or we'll mention it here, one of the two places. But I'm going to mention it now. I'm going to mention a principle now, but more details later on when it connects to other masaa'il. So basically, the person is changing his intention. And when you are in salah, if you change your intention in a manner that is valid, this changing of the intention is valid. It's important to remember this, because we're going to mention other things. Like for example, a decrease in the salah. A person did salam by mistake. He's praying dhuhr. He did salam after 2 rak'ah by mistake, thinking he's in Jumu'ah, for example. Or he's praying 4 raka'at of Isha. He did salam after 2 raka'at, thinking he's in Taraweeh by mistake. Here would we tell him, as we would usually for a person who does salam short before completing all the raka'at, just stand up and complete the remaining raka'at? We'll say no. Why? Because his intention changed. And that links to a mas'ala we spoke about in fasting, and that is istishab al-niyyah. That is a stipulation in your ibadat. So this istishab al-niyyah would have changed. It would have broken. Therefore, the salah would be invalid. So what is istishab al-niyyah, the 2 types, etc.? We'll mention it when we mention a decrease in the salah. But so, therefore, for now, we'd say that a person changes his intention in a manner that is valid to change the intention, then that would be okay. So what happened here? The person changed his intention during the salah. So what happened? He changes intention in one of two situations. Either he stood up by mistake for the 3rd rak'ah, and it's at this point he decides to change his intention. Or before he gets up for the 3rd rak'ah, he changes his intention. One of the two. Either before he gets up for the 3rd rak'ah, or when he stood up. So he stood up by mistake. And it's here he realized he wants to change his intention. So here we have 2 situations. So situation A, before he got up, then he changes intention. He's sitting down, let's say at-tahiyyatu lillah. He decides there, at-tahiyyatu lillah, salawat wa tayyibat. Here, at this moment, he decides I want to change my intention. So when he says, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh, he gets up. So now here he's going to have performed 4 raka'at, and this would be fine. Or he got up from the third rak'ah. He got up for the third rak'ah by mistake. And here he decides, I want to change my intention. I want to change my intention. So here it will be a point of validity. It will be at a point of validity. What does that mean? That means at this point, the person, the way the fuqaha phrase it, many of them say, if he changes his intention here, he completes the salah. If they say atam, he completes the salah. And others don't say that. So here, Uthman ibn Ga'id in his Hashiyah of Muntaha, also I think Sahib al-Mubdi', Burhanuddin, and in Al-Insaf, they mention that what happens here, a person now, he stood up, he wants to pray 4 raka'at now, he has to go back and sit. Into tashahhud and then stand up. He has to go back and stand up. The reason for that is because when he stood up, when he said Allahu Akbar, from sitting to standing, that was by mistake. So it lacked an intention. It's as if that part of the salah had no intention, because once he stood up, he decided, now let me change my intention. So he has to now go back so that the standing happens with intention. So now the standing happens with intention. So that's how they phrase it there. And as I say, the fuqaha across the different schools, sometimes they touch on a mas'ala better than others. And because the masaa'il resemble, you can take assistance from the other madahib. So in this case as well, the Shafi'i madhab have a similar mas'ala. Imam Nawawi rahmatullahi alayhi and others mention of a change of intention in the salah in a manner that is valid. A change of intention in the salah in a manner that is valid. If he changes the intention before doing that extra, it's valid. So what does that mean? Exactly what we said in the previous scenario. That is, before getting up, he decided, I want to pray 3 or 4 raka'at. Or in this case, 4 raka'at. Here it's fine, he gets up, he completes the salah. And then if he got up by mistake and then intended to change his intention, here Imam Nawawi says, does he have to go back to tashahhud to stand up? So he's very clear in how he phrases it. A number of Hanbali fuqaha that I've seen, they are not that clear in how they phrase it. They are not that clear how they phrase it, or such detail like Imam Nawawi that I've seen. So here he says, does this musalli go back sitting down and then gets up so the standing can have intention? He says in their madhab, 2 opinions. He says the stronger, sah, the more correct opinion is that the person goes down sitting, so he stands up with intention. So therefore, in saying that, the second opinion, the Shafi'i madhab, the weaker one or the less correct one, and the way some Hanbali fuqaha phrase it, indicates that if a person were to stand and complete the salah would be valid. So the way they phrase it, I'm saying, you call it ظاهر كلامهم. You call it ظاهر كلامهم. So they don't specify that he's standing here, then he does not go back. For example, they don't say it like that. But they phrase it in a way where it indicates that the standing is already valid, so he can complete the salah. But then others specify this mas'ala. Al-Insaf and Hashid ibn Ga'id, and in fact it might have not been Al-Mubdi', but it's mentioned in Ghayat al-Muntaha of Mar'i al-Karmi. He mentions it very clearly that you go back and you sit to stand up. If you want to stand up, then you go back and you sit down. So when you go back and you sit down, then when you stand up, it has intention. Then when you stand up, it has intention. Okay. So now we've tackled the mas'ala of intention in completing the salah. A few things connected to that. The fuqaha say if a person goes back to sitting and he does not want to complete the salah as 4 raka'at, then here he does Sajdah Sahu and it's mustahab. Just like what we mentioned, if a person completes the 4 raka'at by mistake. That's number 1. Number 2, if a person completed the salah as 4 raka'at, then he does not do Sajdah Sahu. Because it's a permissible increase. And we're going to mention the qa'idah of increasing in raka'at, Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2, we're going to speak on what's the rule on changing your intention during the salah to complete the salah. So we say as a start, at the beginning of the salah, to perform the qasr, to shorten the salah, it's better. It's not fard in the Hanbali madhab, it's better. But during the salah, can you just change your intention? Here Ibn Ga'id, in his Hashiyah, he mentions that the apparent way the fuqaha phrase it would indicate it is permissible. Mar'i in Ghayat al-Muntaha, he says it is makruh. So those 2 opinions. The madhab is that it is permissible. It is permissible to complete the salah once inside to change your intention, it's permissible to do so. So it's not better not to do so, it's okay to do so. It's okay to do so. And then, so if a person were to complete it as 2, that's fine, but subject to sahu. And if a person completes it as 4, it's fine as well. It's fine as well. But as I said, the starting point is doing qasr is better. So if a person were to go back, that's fine as well. That's fine as well. This is for the qasr salah. The next mas'ala we're going to say, the fuqaha, they said, وَلَوْ نَوَى الْقَصْرَ فَأَتَمَّ سَهْوًا. So if this person intended to shorten the salah, I forgot to mention who intends to shorten the salah. Number 1, it's going to be a traveler. The other person is a person performing the salah of a person in war. The salah of a person in war, it's called salat al-khawf, a person performing the salah when he is in fear. So these are the people who shorten the salah. So now we said this person, what did he do? We said when he completed the salah is 4 raka'aat. So we now verified that he did it intentionally. He did it intentionally. With his intention before, with his intention, either he got up by mistake and he sat down. So now here he sits down and now he makes the intention to complete the remaining 2 raka'at. Now here we said if he completed it by mistake or forgetfully, the first 2 raka'at are fard. Right? That's how the fuqaha mention it. Now, if he completes these last 2 raka'at, the question is, are they fard or are they nafil? Why do we mention that? Because the fuqaha mention in their books that then the person, if he completes the salah intentionally, it's fine. He can complete the salah. But then many mention that the last 2 raka'at are, they say the fard are the first 2 raka'at. So the last 2 raka'at are not fard. So it's as if it's nafil. So that means the first 2 raka'at are fard. Now here it's important to know how the fuqaha work. So many of them mention this and then they mention the mas'ala, then they say وَقَالَ ابْنُ عَقِيلٍ. Ibn Aqil says that the first 2 raka'at are fard. And they mention that and then they carry on. So what happens is, if the fuqaha quote a scholar, if they quote a scholar and a scholar's opinion, but they don't mention anything further, they don't oppose it, then in that case it's as if they are approving the scholar's opinion, as if it's their own opinion. That's why they mention it. So it happens, for example, we mentioned the situations where you don't do Sajdah Sahu. I may have not mentioned the last situation that they mentioned, that is Salatul Khawf. So many of them mention Salatul Khawf, that I just mentioned just now, that you don't do Sajdah Sahu if you made a mistake. And then they mention that this is mentioned in Al-Fa'iq. This is Qadi ibn Jabal. He mentions this mas'ala. And they leave it at that. So it indicates that that's their opinion as well. Though with this mas'ala itself, Sheikh Mansour in Kashaf, he mentions that Salatul Khawf, he says if it is severe, if there is severe fear, then in that case no Sajdah Sahu. If it's just normal Salatul Khawf, where there's no extra fear, you're not directly in the war or something, then here you still do Sajdah Sahu. So it's those 2 things they mention there. So in saying this, Ibn Aqil mentions that the fard are the first 2 raka'at. So therefore the last 2 are nafil. Very important to remember that. But in Al-Iqna', Sheikh Yusuf, you will see it in Al-Iqna', he doesn't mention that. Sahib al-Iqna' al-Hajjawi does not mention that. It's as if he indicates that all 4 are fard. Sheikh Mansour in Kashaf, he mentions that he quotes Ibn Aqil for this mas'ala. So we have Al-Hajjawi in Al-Iqna' and also Ghayat al-Muntaha. Mar'i al-Karmi, he mentions it in a way where it indicates all 4 raka'at are fard. All 4 raka'at are fard. So that's very important to know. Why? Because now when we build the following masaa'il, it's going to lead us to something. So we spoke on the munfarid, the person praying alone. So either he completed the salah as 4 raka'at by mistake, sahwan. So he did it by mistake. We spoke on the rule of Sajdah Sahu. And we spoke on the rule of the final 2 raka'at. Then we said the person is praying alone. If he completed the 4 raka'at with intention, we spoke on the rule of Sajdah Sahu, that he does it if he went back, because then he increased the standing in the salah. He increased the standing. If he wants to pray 2, he does Sajdah Sahu. And if he completes 4, then that's fine. And there's no Sajdah Sahu, as we're going to mention it just now again later on. Okay. And then we spoke on the rule on the last 2 raka'at, whether they are fard or whether they are nafil. Why? Because it connects now. If this person is imam, either he would have gotten up and prayed 4 raka'at by mistake, no one at the back corrected him, and he completed by mistake. Then what would the rule be for those people behind on the last 2 raka'at? And that will change whether they are musaafir and also intended 2 at the beginning, or whether they are muqeem and they have to pray 4. Then would they follow him in these last 2? That's number 1. Number 2, when he intended those last 2 raka'at, if we count them as fard, then what about the musaafir who intended 2? And what about the muqeem who has to pray 4? Does he then follow the imam? Because the imam will be praying 4 fard, and he, the muqeem behind, has to pray 4 fard. The muqeem is the resident. And if we say those last 2 are not fard, that means they are nafil. So then the muqeem, what does he do now? Because those 2 raka'at are not fard. So he cannot follow the imam in there. So we see we're building these categories. Then also a masbook, a latecomer. A latecomer is going to be joining the imam. If he joins the imam and the imam is completing 4 by mistake, he's joining the imam in a part of the salah that as if it's not there. It's just extra. So would the masbooks, what would the rule be on the masbook salah, the latecomer who missed a rak'ah plus? Or he would have caught the imam in the last 2 fard. Therefore, the masbook would be following in fard. But then does he masbook, if he's a traveler, he's going to think that they are travelers, so he's going to intend 2, but doesn't know the imam intended and prayed 4. So what's going to happen to his salah? And if he's muqeem, then it is 4 raka'at and 4 raka'at. So now it's fard. Does he know it's fard or does he not know it's fard? And so these situations build up. To knowing what's the rule on the last 2 raka'at. These situations build up to knowing the rule on the last 2 raka'at. Because if this masbook came in and the imam is praying nafil, the qa'idah is, according to the mu'tamad of the madhab, that the person praying fard does not pray the salah behind an imam praying nafil. So now can he join? What if he joins through nafil? What if he realizes during the salah the imam prayed extra, etc.? All these masaa'il build based on the rule of the imam salah. That's why it's very important that we categorized it as we did. Because now, I'm going to digress on to the next mas'ala of a masbook, and then we're going to discuss it there. And essentially, we're going to have to just build the masaa'il together. So they pair up and they build up the masaa'il. Essentially, it's around the similar things, just knowing the rules, then you build them together. That's how fiqh works. But it can be technical, so it needs a person to be sharp. Okay, so now before we touch on those masaa'il, let's mention another mas'ala. It's a mas'ala the fuqaha mention it. In the midst of masaa'il, they mention when about correcting a person making a mistake in the salah. And we phrase it like that. But essentially, it's a person correcting the imam. But they include both, because you can correct a person who's praying himself. So we'll mention that in the upcoming dars or 2 lessons later, inshallah. But they mention a mas'ala there. We're going to mention it now because it connects to our mas'ala. So they speak of a latecomer joining the salah in a rak'ah that the imam has increased by mistake. They speak on a latecomer joining the salah in a rak'ah the imam increased by mistake. So basically what happened here is the imam got up for the 5th rak'ah. Let's say for example, of 4 rak'at, he got up for a 5th. So here, yes, there's going to be situations where you have to inform the imam saying subhanallah, and there's a situation where if the imam does not go back to sitting, the salah becomes invalid. There's a situation where it still stays valid. There's a situation where everyone's salah becomes invalid. Those things, the details in the upcoming lecture. But for now, we're going to assume, we're going to say the imam got up for this extra rak'ah, right? And this latecomer comes. So they say ولا يعتد مسبوق بالركعة الزائدة إذا تابعه فيها جاهلا. Okay, so they phrase it like that. But in fact, the fuqaha of the madhab, other than this one in Rawd al-Murbi', they phrase it in much more detail. So we're going to mention it according to the situations instead of explaining this as is. It's going to be covered in the midst of the explanation. So basically, what they mention is the imam gets up for the 5th rak'ah. So this masbook, this latecomer comes in, right? So now we'd say either he knows this is an extra rak'ah, either he knows it's an extra rak'ah, or he doesn't, or he doesn't, or he doesn't know. And included with that is that either he knows the imam was told, subhanallah, or those behind him indicated, those behind the imam indicated to him that he's up for an extra rak'ah, as they should do, in the manner they should do, which we're going to mention. And the imam did not go back. In this case, there's going to be a situation where the imam does not go back intentionally, everyone's salah breaks. Imam does not go back forgetfully, then only the imam's salah breaks, because he's going to have prayed 5 raka'aat. If there's no other reason connected to it why he's getting up for the extra rak'ah. And those behind him, their salah will be valid. And what they should do, we'll mention it. So now this person comes in, he doesn't know the situation. He doesn't know the situation. He doesn't know it's extra. He doesn't know that the subhanallah has been said, etc. In this case, when he doesn't know the extra rak'ah, he starts the salah, even though this extra rak'ah in the salah, it's as if it's not there, because it shouldn't be there. So we'll say the salah of the ma'moom, the salah of the masbook, they phrase it tan'aqid salatuhu, meaning his salah, as the start of the salah becomes valid. As in for him saying Allahu Akbar in this part of the salah, that's as if it's not in part of the salah, because there's no 5 rak'at in dhuhr, for example. So this 5th rak'ah, it's as if it's not there. But this masbook came saying Allahu Akbar in the part of the salah that's as if it's not there. If he doesn't know this is an extra in the salah, then the starting of his salah would be valid. Meaning, if we were to tell him afterwards it was an extra rak'ah, or he were to find out during the salah, we won't tell him your salah is broken. We won't tell him your salah is broken. His salah continues, so it will start. Right, then if he knows it's extra, if he knows this is extra, then they say in this case he doesn't join the salah. He doesn't join the salah because he knows it's extra. He knows it's extra, or he's heard those behind the imam saying subhanallah and the imam not going back. So he knows something is up. He knows something is up, and it could be an extra rak'ah because those behind are not standing up, for example. In this case, this person, knowing it's an extra rak'ah, and then he does not enter with the imam. If he does enter with the imam, then his salah, the starting of the salah would not connect. It would not start. Okay, so that's important to know that. Important to know that. Then there's a third situation. The second opinion in the Hanbali madhab, and also the opinion of some other fuqaha outside of the madhab, like the Shafi'i madhab, is that it is permissible for a person to perform a fard salah behind a person performing a nafil salah. So based on that, those Hanbali fuqaha who take that opinion say that if this masbook comes knowing this is an extra rak'ah and he starts the salah, his salah will be valid to start with, and it will be valid for him to count this extra rak'ah that he knows is extra. Why? They base it on the fact that it is permissible. Their opinion that it is permissible for a person to pray a fard salah behind the person praying a nafil salah. So it's important to know that, because again it explains how to build fiqh. Based on their opinion, they would deem this correct. And why they would deem it correct. And on the original opinion of the madhab, not we mentioned why it would not be correct. And since there is extra, and this extra, it's as if it's not there. Al-ma'dumu shar'an kal-ma'dumi hissan. Al-ma'dumu shar'an kal-ma'dumi hissan. That's the qa'idah. A qa'idah, we could apply it here, and that is, if something is deemed invalid, if something is deemed non-existent in Shari'ah, if something is deemed as if it's not there in Shari'ah, then in reality, then it's deemed as if it is not there in reality. So we said that, okay. Then there's another situation where this person has entered the salah not knowing, the masbook has entered the salah not knowing this rak'ah is extra. So we'll say the start of his salah, it gets started, it's okay. Then during the salah, he realizes through some way that this rak'ah was extra, that he entered in. For example, he's praying salah, and those beside him who completed the salah with the imam, they spoke that this was an extra rak'ah, the imam prayed an extra rak'ah, or they told the imam you prayed an extra rak'ah. So then he heard. So then he realized, or the imam then did Sajdah Sahu, whatever the situation was, he realized. So in that case, what would we say? He deems this rak'ah as being invalid. So therefore, if he caught in this extra rak'ah, and then he was in his second rak'ah, and then he heard them speaking, so then that first rak'ah we'd say was invalid. Was invalid. So this second rak'ah that he's praying now becomes his first. So then he'll complete the salah as if this rak'ah is his first. Okay, and those who say it's permissible for a person praying fard behind a person praying nafil, they'd say the first rak'ah counts. So that's important to know that. Another situation, this person after his salah, he realizes through some way that the imam prayed an extra rak'ah or extra raka'aat. The rule is one, whether it's one extra or two or three or 10 extra raka'aat. Then in this case, many of the fuqaha say, so in Uthman ibn Ga'id, in the Hashi of Uthman ibn Ga'id, he mentions, and a few other of the Hanbali fuqaha, they say in this case where he completed the salah, when the salah is completed and then he found out it's an extra rak'ah or raka'at, they say the salah is valid. Sheikh Mansour al-Buhuti in Kashaf, he says that if a person then realized after the salah that a rak'ah was extra, then the rules then it's going to be as if he completed the salah praying one rak'ah short, assuming it was one extra. Then he's going to have prayed the salah one rak'ah short. So that means he would have done salam with a decrease in the salah. He would have decreased the rak'ah. So what would the rules be there? We're going to mention it in one of the upcoming lessons when a person does salam before the end of the salah. This is what would have happened to this person. So those rules we're going to mention, they would apply there according to Mansour al-Buhuti. And other scholars of the madhab, Uthman ibn Ga'id and others mention that the salah would be valid because the salah is over now. And it was according to this person, in his situation, it was a valid salah because he didn't know it was extra. Then once the salah is over, then he realized it was extra, but now it's okay. And Sheikh Mansour says now he realized that the salah there was an extra, one of his raka'at was an extra, he followed the imam in an extra raka'ah, which is invalid. So that means instead of praying 4, he prayed 3. And therefore, he has to complete one more rak'ah. How? As we're going to mention in the upcoming lessons. So if we've said that and that is clear, then we can go back to our mas'ala. So we're going to say if the person behind this musaafir who's prayed 4 raka'aat, this person is a muqeem, meaning he has to complete 4 raka'aat. And this person in front, this imam, has prayed 4 raka'aat. If he knew this muqeem, this imam is intending 2 raka'at, and he prayed 4 by mistake. So that's our first situation we mentioned at first. The last 2 were totally by mistake. He had no intention. This muqeem behind, he cannot follow in these 2 extra raka'at. He cannot, because they are not fard, or they are not part of the salah essentially. So this person, this muqeem, when the imam got up for the 3rd rak'ah by mistake, maybe this muqeem wasn't sure, do I say subhanallah, what to do, maybe he changed the intention, he wasn't sure. It turned out this imam prayed the last 2 by mistake, he didn't realize he's musaafir. So in this case, this muqeem ma'moom, as we're going to mention in the upcoming lesson, what to do when the imam's making a total mistake, that the salah kind of becomes invalid. In this case, it won't become invalid because you're allowed to pray 4 raka'at, so it won't become invalid. But those last 2 raka'at, it's as if they are not there. So this muqeem, either he intends to separate from the imam, because these extra 2 raka'at, they shouldn't be there. And specifically or especially if they said subhanallah to this imam, correcting the imam, and the imam did not go back intentionally, then the imam's salah would be invalid. So, and at times those behind their salah would also become invalid. So as we mentioned the masaa'il, what we're going to mention in the upcoming lesson, we just have to join them together. With these different situations. So this muqeem ma'moom behind, if the imam gets up and these 2 raka'at are extra, his salah will not become invalid. So the ma'moom, he can either intend to separate from the imam. Meaning the imam got up for the 3rd rak'ah by mistake, then this muqeem ma'moom knows, for some reason, some way it's an extra 2 raka'at that shouldn't be there. So this ma'moom, here in this moment, he intends to separate from the imam. So then he'll complete the salah as if he was alone. So then he'll get up for his 3rd rak'ah and his 4th rak'ah and salam. The only thing is, the fuqaha mention that when the salah of the imam is making a mistake, and the ma'moom knows it's a mistake, then if the salah of the imam is still valid with the mistake, the ma'moom does not follow the imam in the mistake, but he does not intend to separate from the imam to complete the salah himself. He doesn't intend to separate from the imam to complete the salah for himself. Rather, he does not follow the imam in the mistake, and he waits for the imam to come back to the correct position, and then they complete the salah together. So in this case, based on this, what they would say is essentially this imam salah is valid. This imam salah is valid, unless they said subhanallah, then he didn't go back. He didn't go back. But there must be two people, and there's a few situations there. We're going to mention in the next verse. So assuming the imam salah, and then whatever the person's situation is in there, he analyzes, and then he can apply the rule. Assuming the imam salah is invalid in this case, and it's invalid for him alone, it's invalid for him alone, then in this case the ma'moom intends to separate from the imam, completes the salah himself. If the salah is invalid for everyone, then of course the salah is invalid for everyone. The last situation is where the salah of the imam is still valid. The salah of the imam is still valid. In this case, this ma'moom, this muqeem, does not intend to separate from the imam. Rather, he remains sitting, waits for the imam to come down to sit again in tashahhud. So this ma'moom, that's muqeem, will say at-tahiyyatu lillah, and then he'd stop, he'd wait, because it's his first tashahhud. Then when the imam sits again and he completes his salah saying assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, then this ma'moom would complete his remaining 2 rak'aat. Okay, now we have situation 2, where this imam is going to pray, where these last 2 raka'aat are now done with intention. They're now done with intention, which means if they're done with intention, either they are fard, as al-Iqna' phrases it, and al-Ghayat al-Muntaha, or it's not fard, as Ibn Aqil mentions, and the other fuqaha later quote him. Then in this case, those last 2 raka'at are nafil. Those last 2 raka'at are nafil, and in this case, the ma'moom cannot follow the imam. The ma'moom cannot follow the imam if we deem it nafil. If we deem it nafil, he cannot. So again, these 2 situations apply where he does not break off from the imam, but waits for the imam. Because if this ma'moom follows the imam in a nafil, then it would not be, this ma'moom would be increasing in his salah, because he knows it's a nafil. Maybe he follows that opinion, or he knows the imam did not make the intention. If he follows the opinion of you need the intention, the imam stood up and he didn't come back to sit down to make the intention, right? In that case, then it's a nafil, and then the ma'moom does not follow. And then whether he breaks off the salah, intends to break off, if he were to do so in both the situations above, the salah still has room to be valid overall from the qawaid of the ulama. Or he waits, the salah would still be valid, because the imam salah is still valid. If the imam made the intention before getting up, or he got up, then he sat down, and the ma'moom knows that, and now the ma'moom deems these 2 rak'at fard, then he can follow the imam. And they will both have done 4 rak'at. So that's what would happen there. If the ma'moom does not know, has the imam made the intention or not, so then in that case, what would happen? For example, you're saying subhanallah, he doesn't go back. He doesn't come back. And maybe he could indicate, he gets up and he indicates like with his hand from the side, he could say like get up, indicating that he knows that he's making an extra rak'at intentionally. Then the rule would be, is what we mentioned just now, the intentional increase in the salah. He's made intention. That means he had the intention. Or he just got up. Then you could know, for example, this man he knows the rules of fiqh. He's an aalim in these masaa'il. They're very deep. He has to be quite a deep aalim to know these masaa'il in these details. That this person is increasing in his salah, and he's increased intentionally with the intention. So this person knows it's an increase, and then those rules apply. Or he is not sure. Is this person standing up by mistake, and now that he's up, he doesn't know he should go back? What should he do? For example, in this case, you know that this 2 raka'at are most likely not going to be the fard. Then in this case, most likely the ma'moom salah will still be valid, or it will be invalid if he doesn't come back to the tasbih. So in this case, if the salah is invalid, the person, we're going to mention it, either the imam salah alone is invalid, or everyone's salah is invalid. If everyone's salah is invalid, the mas'ala is clear. Everyone's salah is invalid. If the imam's alone is invalid, this person intends to separate from the imam. And if the imam's salah is valid, but they nafil, or the man is unsure, the ma'moom muqeem is unsure. The ma'moom muqeem is unsure, then he waits for the imam to sit down. Then when the imam does the salah, then he can get up and complete the salah. Or he can intend to break off. As we mentioned, according to the qawaid of the fuqaha, in general, it would be valid. It's just that in the madhab, they mentioned that if the salah of the imam is valid still, then you don't follow him in his mistake or possible mistake. Rather, you do what you sure is correct, but you don't break off from the imam. You don't intend to separate from the imam. So those are masaa'il connected to a muqeem. Connected to a muqeem. And when we discuss correcting the imam in those masaa'il, then these will become clear. These will become clearer because we're going through them quicker, because the objective is just to know the rule on what if this happens, but not exactly how to separate in those things. But hopefully it's clear anyway. The second situation is when a person is a musaafir. A person is a musaafir. Then either the imam completes 4 raka'at by mistake. Those last 2 raka'at should not be there, so the musaafir does not follow anyway. The musaafir does not follow anyway. Or they are nafil. Or they are nafil. So if they are nafil, then you as the musaafir, you don't follow anyway. Or they are fard. Or they are fard. Then if they are fard, then you can complete 4 as well. And if you realize through some way the imam is getting up intentionally, then you, before you're sitting up or before you're standing up, even if they are nafil, it's permissible for you to change your intention in the salah. If they are nafil, then you can realize what's happening, and before you stand up, you can change your intention. You can change your intention. And then it will be, you've intended 2 raka'at in the beginning, you've intended it to 4. And those last 2 will either be fard or either be nafil. Either be fard or either be nafil. And if you are not sure, then you complete your salah as 2 raka'at. If it so happens the imam then tells you after the salah, I intended 4 actually, you guys didn't follow, then you have to then complete 4 raka'at. You have to then complete 4 raka'at, or you have to restart the salah. Or you have to restart the salah because of the difference in intention. Or the difference in intention in the sense that imam intended 4 and you intended 2. Imam intended 4 and you intended 2. So these are more situations that would come about. When you aren't sure or you are sure, then what to do? What to do? The next situation is if a person is masbook. If a person is masbook, then those last 2 raka'at, they're going to be similar to what we mentioned just now. Similar to what we mentioned just now. If he joined the imam, and this masbook is a musaafir as well. So he doesn't know the imam is praying 4 raka'at. He doesn't know the imam is praying 4 raka'at. Then in this case, he might perform 2. He might perform 2. And then after the salah, he's told the imam actually prayed 4. So therefore, if a musaafir is behind the muqeem, or a person is musaafir behind somebody praying full salah, then he has to pray full salah as well. So here in this case, this masbook, that's musaafir, would have to pray the whole salah again, 4 raka'at. And if he never finds out, for example, he enters the mosque, these people, he thinks they're musafir, he joins them in the imam's extra raka'at, and then the imam ended up praying 4, he didn't know, but by the time he finished, those people already left the mosque, he prayed 2, done, his salah would be valid. In a case where the imam got up and prayed 4 raka'at by mistake, all 4 by mistake, this masbook intended 2 raka'at, masbook musafir. How many of the last 2 raka'at of the imam would be as if they're not there. So this masbook would pray how many raka'at? He'd pray 2. Why? Because those last 2, they're not nafil or something. They are not there. It's as if they're not there. So it's important to know that. So then the masbook, if the imam is praying 4 raka'at and we deem them nafil, that means they're extra raka'at. And that means those extra raka'at that we mentioned for the rules of a masbook, of knowing whether they're extra, of entering, whether the validity of the beginning of the salah applies or not, applies here to the masbook. And the last situation is where the imam is praying 4 raka'at, fard. 4 raka'at, fard. Then this masbook, then he will enter, if he's not musafir, we mentioned of musafir, if he's not musafir, then he'll enter and there will be actual raka'at. It will be correct for him he will then complete 4 as he should complete 4. He'll complete 4 and there will not be extra raka'at. It will be 4 valid raka'at. If we deem them nafil, that means this man who wants to complete 4, but he joined the imam, is praying the last 2 or the 3rd or the 4th as extra or as nafil, then in that case, this masbook, that's muqeem, who completes 4 because he wants to complete 4, then in this case, this man would have to repeat those raka'at because they don't count. A musafir, if we're deeming those 2 raka'at as nafil, how much is the fard? 2. So how much would he have to complete? 2, not 4. Okay, so I think these masaa'il, quite a few mentioned. I think we've mentioned them all. Connected to these 2 deep masaa'il. Okay, so we end there. We'll continue with the remaining masaa'il of increasing a rak'ah in the upcoming lectures, inshallah. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to teach us that which benefits us and to benefit us with that which He teaches us. وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين والحمد لله رب العالمين.